Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again. This time we will be talking about biodiversity in line with Biodiversity Day, which is this month. So my guest today is somebody really well known. He's quite a media celebrity and a very old friend, Tawfiq Pasha Muraj. Hello, Pasha. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you very
Pasha,
much, Simi.
thank you for being here. And Pasha, you and I go back a very, very long time, as we'll discover, or let's say our listeners will discover as we progress in this conversation. Let me first give you a short and sweet introduction of Pasha. So I know him because he's on the board of Hisar Foundation. He's been a council member, and he has been with Hisar Foundation since it started almost 25 years ago. In fact, some of the work for that was done in that very garden where he's sitting right now. You're in Malir, Pasha?
No, not right now, but in a garden nevertheless.
Okay. So it all started in his garden in Malir, and maybe later we'll talk about that a little bit more. So with 30 years of experience in horticulture, floriculture, landscape design, home-based food production, and water management, especially of smaller farms and at the grassroots level, Pasha's work is multifaceted. And one facet of that is the work he's done with the Hisar Foundation, as I mentioned earlier, where he has worked on training people on how to grow food, whether they live in urban areas and rural areas. And there was a particularly interesting project we did called Project Abodana, in which Pasha's work formed the central theme. So he's also been working in looking at varieties of high revenue crops interfaced with using water judiciously in different areas of Sindh, in particular the Indus Delta, which is much in the news, and the Indus Basin region as a whole. So in terms of developing food and protection of the environment, Pasha has been teaching a whole generation of Pakistanis how to do that. And his interest continues to be with the Women and Water Network of Pakistan, and also with the various area water partnerships under Pakistan Water Partnership. And of course, lately he has been working on large-scale agriculture. Maybe later you can tell us more about that. So, first question to you, Pasha. How did you come to be so interested in the living environment?
Simi, I grew up, see, we all are in the environment, but generally people have a bubble around them, separating them from the actual environment. So I fortunately never had that bubble around me. I grew up in the outdoors. My parents moved to a farm when I was still in school. Before that, they used to do gardening. So gardening was what I was brought. I believe this is, we all have the great cosmos conspires and puts us there to do particular jobs for it. So I guess that is what was done with me. I was put out there to do particular work. So it's something I did from childhood. And as I grew older, from learning how to grow things and realizing the environment around us is not only plants and not only water and not only the soil and not only the air, there is everything put together is what creates the world. And so I've always worked for it. That's how it is.
You have had a very symbiotic relationship with the living environment, unlike many people. So you are very you're placed in a way that you could really advise others. So if we speak of biodiversity in Karachi and its environments, which habitats, plants and trees would you consider to be of historical importance here and also that are appropriate?
Well, Simi, when we, right now, it's a little complicated. It's not so simple. Our natural environment is varied. So if you even just specifically take Karachi, it has different micro environments which are so worlds apart. So we have a certain area which is a coastline, and we are in an arid region on the world map. We are located in a very arid region. There's very little rainfall. It's more of a desert than anything else. And then Karachi is a seaport. It was lucky that it was a seaport. We are so close to the Indus Delta that also created, it extended up to Karachi. The creeks, Karachi is historically has been full of creeks. Now we've just got a few left. So, these are all various different environments, soil conditions, atmospheric conditions. Then as you get further away, we get from the sea sand, we go into rocks and we carry on into, when you get all the way up close to the superhighway area, I mean, it's totally different. They are the two rivers, major rivers that exist over here, the Lyari and the Malir River. So they have different environments. So it's very broad spectrum, but all related to either arid or saline. So as you see, our beach, Clifton Beach, Sandspit, Hawke's Bay, they don't have much vegetation. We are on the Arabian Sea, not the Indian Ocean. Our breeze is very, very strong, and that comes in from the sea, and it's salt laden. Whereas the Arabian Sea is so different to the Indian Ocean. Most of the places of the Indian Ocean, the coastline you will find, there's a lot of vegetation, the coconuts and the bananas and the pineapples, they all grow there. So part of India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all the way to the other end, you go to East Africa, it's on the Arabian Sea, and it's beautiful beaches and everything, lush green. We lack the rainfall. So that dictates what grows over here. We have no forests, we have jungles. They are short, thorny trees, like the kikar and stuff like that. Then there are small bushes, shrubs, all very thorny, all to protect them from animals grazing, because conditions are so tough for everything to grow. Then you've got those areas which are very saline, they grow the halophytes. Karachi itself, if you go back a few hundred years ago, it didn't have too many different, not a very vast variety of plant life. It's limited because of the arid conditions. Through naturalization, a lot of trees were introduced. Even the khajur, the date palm, is not indigenous to our region. It's not indigenous to the Balochistan either, or the coastline of Sindh or anywhere in Sindh and Balochistan. But a lot was naturalized, including when you have a city, then when the city was developed by the British primarily, for beautification, they brought in a lot of trees and plants, and there has been, it added to the landscape, to the beauty of Karachi's landscape. So all your gulmohars and amaltas were brought in. These are not indigenous, but they are now naturalized. For Karachi's biodiversity, I'm sorry, I've gone a long way around to come to the answer of your question, but people must understand the environment. Now, there are some wild bushes. There's a few of them which grow in my garden, which play host to a particular butterfly. And that butterfly only comes and lays its eggs on that bush. It's not jungly, it's desi. Because when we say wild, when you translate wild into Urdu, it becomes jungly. But it's a wild growing indigenous shrub. And if you remove that, then that species of butterfly is completely gone. Now, there will be just, I would imagine, 5 or 6 locations in Karachi where this bush may be growing. We are in a habit of clearing the natural growth and planting lawns and gardens and beautiful shrubs and trees. So we have completely eradicated the indigenous plants out of Karachi. There are probably half a dozen or a dozen locations where you could possibly find these. So that means once that plant is gone, that species of butterfly is gone. And it's a chain, the food chain. That is all part of biodiversity. All your trees and plants and insects and birds and fish and including your viruses and bacteria, all put together create biodiversity. So we must ensure that we continue planting the indigenous species. Mashallah, now since a few years, since the heat wave came in, that in a way was blessing for Karachi. We lost a few thousand people, unfortunately, God bless their souls. But Karachi learned a big lesson, and a lot of tree plantation was carried out, and with a lot of stress from some people, the indigenous native species are not being forgotten. They are being planted. We just need to keep the ratio correct and keep doing that. But at the same time, we also need to decorate our city, to have it colorful and for it to be smelling nice. You know, plants and trees, they have different purposes. So some you eat from, apples and peaches and pears and guavas and papaya. Some are for the beautification, gulmohar, amalta, sumbul. These add beauty to your city, colors, splashes. There are some which give you timber, wood. There are some which might be useless from our point of view, but it's the only one a particular insect eats. And then there are some which give out perfume. Perfume is not for us. It is to draw the insects and other beings that pollinate the flower. But some of them, the perfume, now imagine if a city like Karachi had Raat Ki Rani planted all over, so there'd be, you know, in the season you'd have perfume. So we must concentrate on every plant species, but very carefully, we must ensure that we are not planting anything that is detrimental, to the environment. So no invasive species, which we have done, and no species which can damage our infrastructure. I can elaborate on each one of these points if at any stage you like, but I'll give you one example. One of the trees that we have even strived to have declared as a heritage of Karachi, the banyan trees. But you know, today's city, Karachi, cannot sustain a banyan tree. The old Karachi could not sustain it. Club Road, Clifton Road, those trees become so big. And when your city expands, your roads expanded, there was less space left for those trees to grow. And those trees are giants. They take over sidewalks, boundary walls, they take over complete houses. So one has to be very, very sensible whilst choosing what to grow.
Okay, thank you for that, Pasha. You know, you've explained how we live in an environment which is largely water-starved. We are very arid, and also the composition of the water of the Arabian Sea is very salty. Okay, which does not lend to a lot of greenery on the beach, or maybe even up to several kilometers inland. And keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind the history you have given to us of these plants, we know a lot of plants are imported, but they have taken root here, and you know, pun intended, as they say. But what I'd like you to tell us is today, as of today, which are some of the appropriate plants that citizens of Karachi should be planting? Whether they plant them in pots or whether they plant them in kyaris or in gardens. What could you name some of those? Those which are adapted and which require less water?
Well, see, the list is quite extensive because there are different types of plants. So if you start from trees and you come down to plants, and we need to plant all of them. Now, they all, like I explained a little while ago, they also, they have different purposes, but then there are different shapes and sizes and types of plants, which also are tools. So to heat up, to reduce the heating up of our cities, we need to also use plants as a tool. So I would start with creepers. I would first talk about creepers. We have miles and miles and miles and thousands and millions of billions of miles of boundary walls in our city that absorb the heat. And of course, also there's such an expense incurred wherever they are being painted and maintained. If we were to grow creepers on our walls, that would reflect a lot of the heat and not absorb it. The creepers that we could have, those that require less water and are also very colorful apart from being green, is the bougainvillea that is so well adapted to our climate and soil conditions, and it requires much less water. Initially, you water it a lot, so it foliages, it grows fast, and then you decrease the water, and then it flowers if you water it less. Then there are so many other creepers that we can grow. There's the Rangoon creeper that gives such beautiful fragrance as well. And chambeli, I mean, in the olden days, we used to see so much chambeli on the walls in people's homes. There's the garlic creeper, there's the syngonium, there's the antigonon, the coral creeper, there's chlorhodendron, which has got beautiful clusters of red flowers. So there's a great, then you know, there are shrubs and bushes. So in that you've got ixoras, they're lovely, they're thick foliage, they've got beautiful flowers. We've got kanher, the oleander, that's in fact, some of them are probably native to our region. They grow in those stormwater drains all over Balochistan and Sindh, which maybe see water once a year or twice or once in 2 years when it rains. They grow beautifully over here. There's a wide range of shrubs that we can be planting. Then when you come into the trees, they're from the medium size, something which is generally called the Chota Gulmohar. You know, it's something that it flowers so well, it's so well adapted. That should be planted. Lignum, another one that the British introduced over here, is a terrific tree, needs much less water, very, very hardy, very good shade, beautiful flowers that looks like it's snowing when it's in bloom. Then you've got your gulmohars and amaltas, and there are new trees also that have come out. Karachi's influence of plants brought in were from 3 or 4 different sources. If you look at historically, the population of Karachi was a lot of the local people, but also a lot of people who came in from Gujarat and other places. So you had the Goan population that came from Goa. So, you know, there were people who came from Bengal. They brought the coconuts, and the people from Goa brought the coconuts, and they brought the targola, and, you know, then the British brought trees, and then there was the Parsi lot. They, you know, had their favorites. So all these people, these cultures and peoples added plants to Karachi. So yes, the list kind of goes on. I've put out lists of trees, and I'm constantly trying to upgrade that and working on a larger document. I don't know when that will get complete.
Well, certainly I have put out one of your lists before on Camp Foundation website and on Twitter, and certainly we will do so again if you keep updating that. Tell us about the neem tree. You know, Karachi used to have many more neem trees than we see now. So what happened to them?
Actually, the way the neem tree disappeared at one stage, so did a lot of other trees. That was because of monoculture over the last 10 years or so with the Cornucopus. But they are there. Neem was one which has been also continuously being planted. People had stopped planting gulmohars and other flowering trees and fruiting trees entirely, but neem was still being planted. There are hundreds and thousands of neems which are being planted, in Karachi. Hundreds and thousands of neems. When people like the forest department and other individuals plant or have been planting the last 5 years, you will find that the mortality rate is quite high. It's about 60, 70, 80%. So only about 20% of the trees survive. We've had millions planted by individuals, by citizens. Unfortunately, the survival rate on that has been low. The other civic agencies that have planted also, unfortunately, they realized that we need to plant trees. What they didn't realize is that we should ask somebody who knows. So you have these constant experiments at planting. They don't follow the correct seasons. Last 3 days, the temperature has been above 40 degrees. I'm sure if you look around, you'll find somebody or the other who planted trees last 3 days. There are those people who will be planting them in the middle of December and January when it's so cold. Unfortunately, unko, and I explained to them because in Urdu, thoda sa zyada samajh mein aata hai. Hum kehte hain winter, हम कहते हैं ऑटम फॉल. तो ये फॉल क्या होता है जी, ऑटम क्या होता है? जब आप उनको कहें खिज़ां, खिज़ां के बाद जाड़े का मौसम आता है, उसके बाद बहार आती है, फिर गर्मियां आती हैं, फिर सावन आता है. तो still it is difficult to explain it to them, get across to them. They all then have their reasons at times. They've got agendas, they've got people they have to show to that they're doing something. Unfortunately, so even when people come to me on Earth Day and Environment Day and say, Pasha, we want to plant a tree. It's 22nd April, you want to plant a tree, please, for God's sakes, what's gone wrong with you? On the 5th of June, you want to plant a tree? No, I won't. Then there's other things we could be doing for the planet and for the Earth. So, but slowly we are getting there. They are, because some of them don't learn. So you will have them planting full-grown coconuts and date palm trees and other such things at the beach. Now I think we'll be probably the only country in the world which will have lawns on its beaches and maybe tiles. So that is one unfortunate part. I wish we had people given responsibility of looking after people. Yeah, people given the responsibility of planting or of looking after the environment, looking after the coast. If there's somebody looking after the coast, it should be somebody whose 7 generations have lived on the coast. He knows what he's talking about. You don't put a little shamiana on Seaview and say Cyclone Relief and Information Center. वो cyclone तो क्या, वो किसी की फूंक को नहीं बर्दाश्त करेगा. Yeah, that's stupid. I'm sorry, but that's stupid. क्या कहें?
Use the wisdom and the experience of people who have really worked in this area. So all the indigenous people of Karachi, people who have lived here for 200 years, all the fishermen communities, people working in the mangrove areas, those who have had farms in Damloti and Malir, where all the underground water used to be at one time, and all those traditional water wells. There's one on your farm, Pasha, I know, which is like 100+ years old. So we have tended not to listen to them. And we have tended to, as you say, just ad hoc people who come from here and there because they happen to be in some kind of official capacity, and they learn something from somewhere and they decide to do that, which is very unfortunate because, we have all been to other parts of the world where every city and every town we go to looks completely different from the other because, they have used their tradition. We don't have to be like any other city, or we don't have to emulate what the British do in their own little islands. That, we have to develop what is suitable to our environment. That's what biodiversity is all about. And in this part of the world, What works is growing plants in pots, in kyaris, having courtyards, having fountains, recycling water, having little talavs. Those are the kinds of things, kind of natural habitat. Would you agree, Pasha?
Absolutely, Simi. Roof gardens is very essential in our country. Again, that's environmentally sound, and it's utilizing such a huge space which is normally going to waste. Today, people's, in the olden days, they used to be big houses and huge garden spaces, but that's no longer there. People are forced to live in buildings. So in apartments, flats, I think those roofs on top of every tall building, it should be mandatory to have a green roof. Or you get some brownie points for it. Your taxes are reduced, or some benefit could be given to the citizens that would get them to put the time, effort, and money into developing those. Our parks need to be much better everywhere. I mean, if you can grow a plant in your kitchen, you should be doing that.
Okay. Now, if you recall, Pasha, we worked together in Nisar Foundation some years ago on this project Abodana, where we actually taught people how to grow different kinds of plants, which would in fact start producing something or the other using kitchen water. And then I think we trained like a few thousand of these in Karachi. Do you recall something from that experiment, and what were the kinds of plants that we suggested people should grow?
Okay, Simi. So let me remind you of the complete background of this. Basically, in 2002, 2003, I had started my kitchen garden program on TV. And by the time 2005 earthquake came, actually it was, the name of the show was Baghbani, but I had already taught growing vegetables at home in that. And I was doing little bits and pieces here and there, teaching people about vegetables. At the earthquake time, 2005, when I returned from Balakot, I visited our camp at Hassa, and I went down to Balakot itself. I made a few shows on the earthquake, environmental impact of earthquake, and I did one which was on the water and sanitation issues of the earthquake zone. We even did a few shots of the video at Hassa at the camp, and we met with doctors and everyone. When I came back from there, I brought the concept of giving trees, and specifically timber and fruit trees, and seed for corn and vegetables to the earthquake affectees. And by the time you managed to put it all together, and we got some funding for it, so I came back from Balakot, was November, middle of November, we met. That's when I met Todd also in your office for the first time, and we discussed this project. 2006 end saw you getting us the funding from Deutsche Bank, was it? And I took off for a year. I taught people in Rawalakot. We did 100 women heads of households and taught them how to grow vegetables and gave them trees and all that. I did about 8 trips out to Rawalakot. And then we did this one, which was the Abedana. I forget the year, but we did 44,400 women. So I directly trained 400 women, and then they trained 10 each, and then they trained 10 each, and it was 44,400 women. I tell you, just out of the Rawalakot women, because Rawalakot, I went back to many times. I've done other projects over there. There are a couple which I still would like to do one day, but I met, I think he was Shabir Shah, who was with the NRSP in Rawalakot, and he told me, he says, Pasha Sahab, बहुत सारों की तो बहुत कुछ हुआ, लेकिन एक औरत ने जो बच्चों की तालीम पर पैसे खर्च किए वो उसने इधर से निकाले थे. She didn't tap into her other resources for her children's education. Growing vegetables paid for it. So I think the results were very good, and through the TV show, through the social media that I've done, my timing was very right. I think in Pakistan, through the help of various partners, I managed to kickstart the Grow Your Own Food movement campaign, and the global Grow Your Own and Grow Organic movements were also starting at the same time. So the timing was very, very right. And I think we've all collectively managed to make quite an impact. There's a lot of people growing their own food in Pakistan today. And it takes time. It's still not reached that stage where it's making a significant impact on a country level, that the country is saving money out of it. But sure, people are getting stuff to eat without paying for it, and that's what matters. It just has to trickle down into the masses. So, wo bhi ho jayega.
Yes, well, I grow my own vegetables now, Pasha. Next time you come by, I'll cook you something. Okay. Now, you mentioned something about social media. So that is my next question. You are, of course, a celebrity. TV made you a celebrity. But then you discovered social media. And I remember in those early years when you would talk to me about that. And that has also helped you engage with youth a lot. So tell me a little bit about how social media helped you to get your message across, and also how you're working with young people at the moment.
Okay, so social media, I think I used to tell my kids, what? You've got 2,000 friends? What do you mean you got 2,000? How can you have 2,000 friends? You can have 5 friends, 10 friends, 20. How do you have 2,000? And then I discovered social media. So about 2008, I came onto Facebook, and then later on the others, I was not as active. But Instagram now I'm making an effort because it takes up a lot of my time. I'm a one-man show, a one-man army. There's a lot I do. What did happen was that I was always involved with schools and colleges and giving talks on how to grow this and how to grow that. And then since the involvement with Hisar, then it was on water conservation and you know, little talks to kids and young adults. And I'd always had schools visiting the farm for field trips. TV gave that connectivity to another age group, which was college, university. Colleges and universities would also regularly call me to give lectures. One thing was that I guess my canvas was very wide. So it wasn't only talk about how to grow plants, but how to grow trees, how to grow vegetables, or just how to grow basically water conservation, a little bit of involvement in the women's livelihood, gave a little, also being very socially active in social activism and social movements. So, you know, so I started, you know, kids from social sciences would come and talk to me, and I'd help them with their projects. And we've run this is all influenced from when I was a kid, Simi, because in the 1971 war, my father had an organization called the Emergency Mobile Corps. And the Emergency Mobile Corps had civil defense status, and we were acknowledged by the Civil Defense Organization of Pakistan. And at that age, I remember going out with my dad, and we used to go on at night for blackout duty, and with a whistle, and whistle at people's homes and say batti bujao and stuff like that. Then 77, 78 floods. I was very involved with my dad in the, we used to call them refugees in those days. It was not displaced persons. And you had 2 refugee camps in Karachi. At that time, Orangi was not developed and Korangi was not developed. There were these camps over there and distributing food and clothes, bedding, medicines, milk for children. It was all those experiences working with my dad from, say, maybe 71 to what, 78, 80. I learned a lot, and that I worked. So whether it was putting up the wall of kindness, or it was going out for the cup of kindness, or going out in winter nights and giving food. And the idea is I can only do it and get to 100, 500,000 people. But through social media, when I do something and I have a following, the youngsters, they also relate to the way I talk. I'm real. I talk in their language. I am a non-conformist. I don't look like everybody else who comes to talk to them. So I have a following, mashallah, of the youngsters, and they've got the energy, and they've got the numbers as well. So they learn how to do things, and they get inspired. So everything that I have done has been multiplied thousands of times on social media. So, and I'm very, very active on both Instagram and Facebook. I've got 12.5 groups and 4 or 5 pages on Facebook. That's a lot. Of course, public is about 6 groups are public and 2 or 3 pages. But the views I get, the number of shares to my post, and then I also see how people share it without you actually it registering for you. So the reach is there. I cannot reach everybody, but as long as I can reach people who can reach people, and then there's a lot of us, will be able to make a change. I think, as I used to insist with you, and I used to do this. I mean, there's even a small group. My mother used to be a secretary of and the treasurer for a long time of the Ladies Horticultural Club. And they're all old ladies, and I used to tell them, "Dekhe, take in youngsters, make them virtual members of the club. आते नहीं हैं वो लोग, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं आते हैं, वो अपने phone पे तो आपकी discussion को सुन लेते हैं ना. That's good enough. That's how you reach across to them. And that's what I used to tell you. Okay, we need to get on social media because your reach is very extended through social media."
Yes, Pasha, I am on Twitter now, very active, but you are not over there. But I think if we put all of us from HR Foundation and the different platforms we work on, yes, I agree with you that we are making an impact, and we should be making an impact after 20 plus years of work behind us, and you being, one of the pioneers of that work. So now tell me, you have had an impact with youngsters, you have had impact through social media, you are heard, you are one of, you belong to a family that has lived has roots in Karachi for a few hundred years, and you are fully, what we say, sons and daughters of the soil in the real sense. So keeping all of that in mind, tell us a little bit about the recent work that you have done working on big farms in Sindh, helping to change the way those farms are run. That's also of, would be of great interest to people
Yes,
listening in.
Simi, that is very necessary. So changing the mindset of the small farmers, the Haris, teaching them new methods, and it's not always up to them. It's the landlord who has to be convinced that times have changed and methods have changed. So we need to get very, very modernized in our agriculture and irrigation, but keeping in mind that getting modernized does not mean chemicalized, you know. So we have to ensure that we are growing safe food, because see, something totally different, Simi, but I took a picture of these 2 or 3 guys sitting on top of a truck. The truck was carrying coal. These 3 guys were sitting on top, and the whole truck was black. The driver sitting inside the truck was all black. These 3 guys were all black. They must have shared a joke, but they were laughing, and the teeth were white. And I thought to myself that what is their future? These are people who are the most marginalized, whose wage is probably the lowest it could get. What is their future? They're going to be so sick, they're not going to be able to afford medical health. Their families will not be able to afford it. Once these guys are sick, their families will suffer because there'll be nobody bringing in the daily bread. At the end of the day, it is loss of productivity for the state and also a drain on its resources, whatever resources it does pay for public health. These people would end up at government hospitals and be a drain over there. So the same way, if we are going to grow poisonous food and our population at large will fall sick, it's going to cost the state. So we have to modernize, but without any more chemicalization of our food. Both agriculture and irrigation has to.
So
we have to also.
So Pasha, when you tried to work with some of these big landlords in Sindh, have you had any success with them?
Yes, more or less, I think there has been success. Sometimes it costs money. They have to wait. They have to change their style of agriculture. That does cost them. But they do, because they can see the changes in their earnings, their potentials, their agricultural crops. So they see this difference.
Okay, now that is good news, because what we have learned from the last so many decades is that people who have rent-seeking behavior and they put their land out on lease for landless people to work on it, they are very resistant to change, because they're comfortable, there's a comfort zone and they want to remain there. So that's very good. It's good to hear that people are listening. They are listening to people like you, and that they are making changes. So we are getting close to our appointed 40 minutes. So let me ask you, Pasha, what do you think we should be doing in the next 10 years? Next 10 years, what are some of the main things we need to do to green Karachi and also to maintain the biodiversity in Sindh? So Karachi and then Sindh.
Over the next 10 years, for sure, I would say less. In 8 years, we should look at not be burning any more fossil fuels. We should look at complete change of lifestyle. We should look at a complete change of environment, it has to be drastic changes. None of this greenwashing, none of this making everyone believe that you're doing a lot. And there's no more time to make mistakes. There's no more time to make mistakes and learn through trial and error. The decisions have to be taken. We also have to educate our masses and our youngsters. The future is theirs 10 years from now, whether we are going to be around or not, but these guys will. So we've also got to arm them to deal with that changed world. You and I can very easily imagine what it's going to be like. In our younger days, we used to read comics, and in that they used to show people wearing masks and talking and looking at people and talking to them with a handheld device. We are doing that. We are talking with a handheld device and we are wearing masks. So, Simi, that time has come. It's 10 years is taking us to the year 2031. I keep telling people, आजकल लोग इस पे नहीं बात करते हैं, but there are 26 years left for us to get to 2047, 100 years of Pakistan. 26 साल तो गुजरने में ऐसे गुजर जाएंगे, आपके मेरे बच्चे बड़े हुए होंगे, serious बड़े. They'll be getting to be close to our ages. It's frightening. So it has to be a drastic change in all of this.
So you are saying 10 years is too long and we need to do it now. All the changes have to be done now. I fully agree with you because as a geographer, we have been, me and my ilk, we've been shouting for the last 50 years about the changes that are going to happen. Look at the IPCC scientists whom nobody takes seriously. And even their worst estimates have been surpassed. So the changes are happening even faster than anybody would have envisaged. And look at the heat wave. Look how hot it is today. Unbelievable.
Simi, I'm in Ghadani. It's been extremely hot 3 days. I was in Malir and yesterday I was in the city partly and then I've been in Ghadani. It just started raining 5 minutes ago. So hopefully it's going to cool down a little bit. But this heat and those heats, these come and go.
So Pasha, thank you very much for talking to us today. We could go on for another hour. So perhaps we can try again. And it would be great to have another conversation in Urdu. So आपके साथ एक और नशिस्त रखेंगे और वो इंशाल्लाह उर्दू में करेंगे. आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. उम्मीद है कि आपसे जल्द मुलाकात होगी. खुदा हाफिज. Ladies and gentlemen, let me sign off and wish you happy viewing for the future episodes of Conversations with Simi Kamal. All our water conversations. Thank you.